Saludos a toda la afición de Lucha Libre Online. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y tenemos el enorme privilegio de presentarles a nuestro invitado especial en la tarde/noche de hoy. Gente, directamente desde Tokio, Japón, para el mundo, una de las mentes maestras detrás de los videojuegos y del éxito que tuvo THQ con la WWE. Justin Leeper is in the house here on Lucha Libre Online. Mr. Leeper, it is an honor for us to have you as our guest. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great today. It's a wonderful day here in Tokyo, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for reaching out and being so kind and patient as I was able to make some time to do this interview. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for being here and for granting us part of your time during, middle of that tight schedule you probably have. And I wanted to start this interview asking you, I know we were part of a huge moment in terms of WWE's video games. You were part of the development on 2009, 10, and 11 of WWE SmackDown vs. Raw, among many other things that we will be talking about during the interview. But I wanted to ask you, how did your passion for pro wrestling started?
Well, I guess as a little kid, I remember watching Junkyard Dog on TV. He was my favorite WWF superstar. And watching wrestling on a Saturday morning, I think my mom came in the room and she said, all that stuff is fake, right? And I started crying. I was just like, Junkyard Dog was this big, strong dude. And, everybody else was so comic book style, larger than life. But my dad and my parents were divorced. My dad was a wrestling fan. And when I would go visit him, we'd watch AWA because he lived in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And being able to see the Road Warriors, wow, those guys blew my mind because they were, they took the kind of superhero aspect even further. And they were just awesome. And going a little bit further on in starting at about second grade of elementary school, I went to school with a guy who liked wrestling even more than me, and we became best friends. And that guy's name was Austin Aries. And I went on to start wrestling training at about 20 or 21. He happened to be living in a different part of Minnesota. I called him up. I was like, dude, I'm pro wrestling at Eddie Sharkey's camp. Eddie Sharkey, who trained the Road Warriors. And he was like, no, you're not. That doesn't happen. You can't just train in wrestling. I was like, come up here and visit. So he came up, saw the ring. He fell in love like I did. He moved up with me, lived on my couch for a while. And then we got a 2-bedroom. And he, took to it much faster than even I did. So it was pretty amazing. And, I love my experience. But the best part about being in wrestling, I think, besides the THQ stuff, was getting him involved.
I'll translate that to Spanish. ¿Cómo comienza la pasión de Justin Leeper por la industria de la lucha libre? Él creció admirando figuras como Junkyard Dog, sus papás eran divorciados, entonces su mamá tenía una visión de las cosas, pero cuando llegaba a casa de su papá sí se le permitía ver lucha libre, y allí viviendo en la parte norte de Estados Unidos tuvo la oportunidad de ver la AWA, en donde vio figuras como los Road Warriors en aquel momento. Historia larga corta, pasamos hacia adelante un poco en el tiempo, comienza a entrenar o buscar un lugar para entrenar cuando tenía 20, 21 años, y resulta que junto con su amigo, que es Austin Aries, todos lo conocemos como el ex campeón de TNA, entre muchísimas otras roles importantes que tuvo en la industria, pues junto con Austin Aries entrenan en la escuela de Eddie Sharkey, que fue la persona que originalmente entrenó a los mismos Road Warriors, y una vez ellos ven el cuadrilátero por primera vez, simplemente se enamoran. Austin Aries, por su parte, vivió un tiempo con él hasta que pudieron conseguir un apartamento de 2 cuartos, que fue un poco más grande, pero antes Austin Aries dormía en su couch, en su sofá, así que es una historia bastante interesante de ver cómo fueron estos inicios humildes en Minnesota para Justin Leeper y Austin Aries. You mentioned that you were training to become a pro wrestler, but you were a pro wrestler yourself for a while. Why did you decide that being inside the ring was your thing?
I wanted to give it a try. When I was in high school, I did taekwondo for quite a few years, in middle school as well. And I was always kind of a chubby, not athletic kid growing up. But as I got into adulthood and kind of leaned up and started taking better care of myself, something like being in pro wrestling, such a dream job, you have to at least give it a try, I think.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo comienza o por qué decide entrar al cuadrilátero? Pues él menciona que era un niño llenito o gordito en aquella época, como menciona Chubby, y él practicaba taekwondo en el área de cuando estaba allá en la escuela superior o en el high school, y de ahí en adelante él decía como que pues es algo que en algún punto tenía que intentarlo. What do you recall of your first bump inside Eddie Sharkey's school? Because usually the first bump sucks.
Well, to be honest, the first bump wasn't too bad. What really hurts is running the ropes, because once you're activating, you're putting pressure on parts of your body that aren't used to being touched, much less smacked. So running the ropes the first day, man, I was sore for a long time after that. So that, to me, I remember as kind of being that painful first part of pro wrestling.
I'll translate that. ¿Qué fue lo más que le dolió de ese entrenamiento inicial de Justin Leeper? Yo le pregunto por su primera caída, por el primer bump, por lo general es lo que le duele. Él dice como que no fue tan mala. Correr las cuerdas, running the ropes, eso sí fue doloroso con los moretones en la espalda. No es algo que le deseo a nadie estando en esa posición y no es bonito. What do you recall of your first pro wrestling match? That's one thing is training. The other thing is going and graduating. What do you recall of the audience energy, your opponent, how you felt mentally? Was it what you expected?
My first match came as a surprise to me because I was at a show to help out. When we're rookies, we pay our dues by setting up the ring and just helping out wherever we can. Well, there was an empty spot and they needed me. I didn't even have any gear. I had to borrow the singlet from the other trainer, Terry Fox, who's at least 100 pounds more than me. So this was a big singlet that didn't really fit, somebody's boots that were a little small, and I wrestled a guy that I didn't really know very well. He took pretty good care of me, but I remember, when I was done, my nose was bloody and the back of my head had smacked on the ring post. So it was a tough first match, but I was glad to get it out of the way.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo ocurre esa primera lucha de Justin Leeper en la industria de la lucha libre? Sorpresa, gente. Él no estaba pautado a debutar ese día. Cuando comienzas en la industria de la lucha libre tienes que pay your dues, o sea, hacer todo lo posible por ayudar y ganarte tu espacio. Surge una oportunidad y faltaba una persona. Necesitaban a alguien. Ahí de esa manera entra Justin Leeper. No tenía ropa, no tenía gimmick, no tenía botas, no tenía nada. Entonces entra su entrenador Fox y le presta un singlet de él, o sea, un atuendo de una pieza que él pesaba más de 100 libras más que Justin Leeper. Entonces el atuendo le quedaba grande y le prestaron unas botas de alguien que las botas le quedaban pequeñas. Y recuerda de su primera lucha que la nariz acabó toda sangrando, ese bloody nose, y el golpe en la cabeza con el ring post o con el poste. Pues no fue una experiencia bonita, pero qué bueno que pude salir de eso. Fast forwarding a little bit in time, how do you make it? You made it, like, when was the exact moment that you decided to enter inside the video game industry?
Well, almost parallel to my wrestling training, I was working at Game Informer magazine, which is the biggest video game magazine in the US. It wasn't that big back then, but I ended up getting a job with them, which moved me to Minnesota so I could train with Eddie Sharkey. So I was doing that. And then I left to live in LA instead of Minnesota. So I started training in stunts and got in touch with the THQ guys. They were in LA as well. And they called me in for an interview to be just a regular gameplay designer on the WWE game series.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo entonces comienza esta travesía de Justin Leeper dentro de la industria de los videojuegos? Pues mira, mientras él estaba entrenando en Minnesota, a la misma vez estaba trabajando con la revista de videojuegos más importante de Estados Unidos. En aquel momento no era tan grande como lo es ahora, pero lo fue lo suficientemente como para que él moverse a Minnesota, establecerse allí, ganar un sueldo y entrenar lucha libre. Historia larga corta. Llega a California, a Los Ángeles, y ahí entonces empieza a entrar en stunts o en dobles, vamos a decirlo de esta manera. Mientras buscaba trabajo, de momento THQ, que era la empresa que anteriormente tenía los videojuegos de WWE, lo contacta, hacen un acuerdo para entonces trabajar como diseñador gráfico de los videojuegos de WWE producidos por THQ. As mentioned earlier in this interview, you were one of the masterminds behind SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, 2010, and 2011. What do you recall of the producing process of this video game, because it's gotta be a huge stressful environment.
Yeah, it's strange because we balance so much between designing in THQ and then the development and the coding going on with Yuke's in Japan. So yeah, I was brought in as a normal designer, but I quickly talked to Corey, the creative director, and we decided to start working on a new story mode. So story modes in the past were getting a little bit silly, and my thought was that let's focus on these established characters, either as stars or as rivals, and let's really take advantage of these characters we have. Let's give really good situations for them, and Road to WrestleMania was kind of born out of that.
I'll translate that. Una de las aportaciones más grandes que hizo Justin Leeper a la industria de los videojuegos, específicamente a la franquicia de SmackDown vs. Raw, fue ese famoso Road to WrestleMania. Producir eso fue bastante interesante por el hecho de que él le decía a sus compañeros, vamos a utilizar estos personajes que ya tenemos, vamos a utilizar estos elementos que ya tenemos, que son cosas que tal vez ya existían, pero entonces había que llevarlas al próximo nivel. Y Justin Leeper es que se le ocurre la idea de entonces crear ese Road to WrestleMania para los diferentes videojuegos de WWE. What was the most complicated part of your job as a producer for the WWE video games?
I would say that it was getting WWE approval at first, because everything I did had to go through them. Every word that anybody spoke, any above kind of top-down storyline ideas had to be approved from them before we could move on. And that first one in 2009. WWE was kind of taking their sweet time to get back to us with approvals, but we had to do motion capture. We had to do, gameplay design. We had to do all of these things that were waiting for them. And when they actually sent one of their writers to THQ to meet with me. And I thought that he would just say, okay, yeah, we approve. Maybe there's a few little changes, but he had actually not read anything. So he wanted to kind of go into business for himself and start from the beginning and make these storylines. And I said, well, wait a minute, we're on a deadline. We have 11 months to make a video game, and we're already 2 months in. We have to get to these points. And my boss said, we need to get his approval. So I really had to pull some magic to get him to be okay with these ideas that did not force me to start back from scratch. And that was really stressful. Luckily, on the other two games after that, I earned WWE's respect, and they allowed me to, for example, use my own motion capture talent and do things like retire HBK or turn Rey Mysterio heel that maybe they wouldn't have let anybody else do.
I'll translate that. El Road to WrestleMania fue una de las cosas que más nos llama la atención, pero le pregunta a Justin Leeper cuál fue la tarea más complicada dentro de su rol como productor. Y él dijo obtener la aprobación de WWE en las cosas. El approval de WWE era algo bien importante, tomaba mucho tiempo. Y entonces en ese primer año que estaban trabajando, obviamente todavía no había ganado esa confianza. Y tenemos 11 meses para establecer un videojuego. Ya llevamos 2 de los meses trabajando en esto fuertemente. Tienen que avanzar, ya tenemos una historia, mientras que por el otro lado los WWE le estaban pidiendo, ok, no, vamos a reescribir esto de nuevo, como que no, tenemos un due date, tenemos un timeline, hay que seguirlo y tenemos que hacer esto poco a poco, dándole un poquito hacia adelante en el tiempo. Ya una vez él se gana la confianza de ellos, fue mucho más sencillo, lo dejaban trabajar de manera más creativamente libre, utilizar su motion talent para trabajar todo este tipo de escenas, el suyo, ya no tenía que recurrir a los que la empresa tenía, y le dieron un poco más de libertad creativa en este aspecto, pero para que vean que WWE también retuvo también el control de la creación de los videojuegos durante mucho periodo de tiempo. The Road to WrestleMania is actually pretty interesting as a general. What's your favorite story among the, I believe, 9 there are?
Well, really, I think we're looking at, I think there were 6 in 2009, 6 in 2010, and maybe 5 in 2011. So, I was the one to come up with the scenarios, and I wrote a lot of those scripts, or at least edited them. So they're all kind of my children. But, right now on my YouTube channel, I'm playing through the Versus Undertaker story. And I like that one maybe best because it's like a video game. I use elements of survival horror games. And I have really good feelings of the voiceover talent that we used for the created superstar, and being able to bring back Paul Bearer was great. So maybe it's because I'm playing it right now, but I would say versus Undertaker in 2011 was maybe my favorite.
I'll translate that. Me corrigió porque cometí un error. No son 9, son 6 en el 2009, 6 en el 2010 y 5 en el 2011. O sea, son un total de 17 historias dentro de este Road to WrestleMania que él mismo las escribió. O sea, como mencioné anteriormente, podía volver a Rey Mysterio heel o podía retirar a Shawn Michaels, cosa que eventualmente pasó. Pero él menciona que en su canal de YouTube, el canal de YouTube se llama Violent Lee, ahí lo pueden ver, narrando todo este tipo de historia, y está jugando ahora mismo el versus de The Undertaker, que es la más que le llama la atención, porque podías traer de regreso a Paul Bearer y es su historia favorita hasta el momento en cuanto al road to WrestleMania. I know you not necessarily work with a lot of the wrestlers due to you having a completely higher role than the guys that were, you know, in charge of the motion. You were on a superior position, but do you have the opportunity to interact with some of the wrestlers? And if yes, which ones?
Yeah, so I actually directed all of the motion capture. Yep. I felt that because I was a writer and a former wrestler and an actor, I would be able to be kind of the best one to be overseeing all the motion capture. So from 2010, I brought in my own team. So what used to happen is there were some actors, and then WWE would send some development talent in to do the more wrestling scenes. But I had friends like Colt Cabana and Chris Hero and Lacey, and I knew that they were able to act as well. So I brought them in. Some other people that I used Paul London for doing shooting star presses. Cesaro played Edge in 2011. So, and Jack Swagger. So I had guys that were, you know, really high level pro wrestling talent that weren't in WWE. Austin Aries came in and did a lot of motion capture for me as well. So yeah, I got to work, you know, right next to a lot of those guys and direct them. But they were all such great talents that it was probably the most fun part of my job.
Before I go to the translation, you mentioned Cole Cabana, Paul London. You also mentioned Austin Aries, Cesaro. Who was the other person you mentioned?
Lacey. She's a female wrestler who's wrestled around quite a bit back in the day.
Perfect. And you mentioned this guys basically at that point weren't under contract with the company.
Right, they were all independent wrestlers at the time.
Pretty interesting. I'll translate this. Le pregunto sobre este proceso creativo, de qué oportunidades tuvo de trabajar con algunos de los talentos de la empresa. Cuando él gana la confianza de la empresa, él tuvo la oportunidad, él estaba dirigiendo todo lo del motion scene, todo lo de las acciones, porque sentía que como productor y escritor, él debía pues ver que se estaba haciendo las cosas bien y está excelente. Y comienza a traer a sus amigos de afuera. ¿Quiénes son las personas que realmente estuvieron detrás de todo este proceso de animación de los videojuegos de WWE en el 2009, 2010 y 2011? Colt Cabana, una persona que no estaba bajo contrato con la empresa, luchador independiente. Lacey, que es una de las luchadoras que él mencionó. Paul London para los Shooting Star Presses. Austin Aries, entre muchísimas otras personas. Cesaro trabajó en los motion de Edge y trabajó en los motion de Jack Swagger en aquel momento. Entonces es bien interesante porque todos ellos eran luchadores independientes buscando un dinero o un sueldo y eventualmente ganarse una oportunidad con la empresa. Y qué bonito saber que de todo, yo creo que excepción de Lacey, el resto todos en algún punto tuvo la oportunidad de trabajar para la empresa en algún rol que otro, y me parece sumamente interesante. Así que trabajaba con talento bastante frecuente y ese era su equipo de trabajo. You work for THQ, which in my opinion, with the respect of the 2K franchise, has been the best work in terms of WWE video games so far. But I want to know your opinion regarding that. What's your opinion on WWE 2K's franchise? But besides, like, not about shading, but what's missing on their product compared to what THQ offered back then?
Well, I think that, you know, we put a lot of passion into it. And we, you know, spent a lot of time with attention to detail. We were always trying to improve, always trying to be creative, do cool new things. I think that what 2K does is they focus on their brand. You know, they have this basketball game, NBA 2K. They try and make it every game fit into that brand. And I think with the WWE 2K series, they're trying to do the same thing. and I think that sometimes when you focus on the brand and not making something cool and innovative, maybe you come up a little short.
Makes sense. I'll translate that. WWE 2K son quienes tienen los videojuegos ahora mismo de WWE. Hemos escuchado sus críticas, por eso preguntamos esto. De hecho, esta pregunta nace gracias a que un seguidor dijo, pregúntale esto. I was saying that this question was actually because one of our followers said, hey, we're interviewing Justin, ask him about WWE 2K. So I'll translate to Spanish. Referente a WWE 2K, ¿qué le hace falta? Bueno, THQ trabajaba de manera más creativa, más innovadora, más detallada en ese producto específicamente y no en la franquicia. 2K sí. 2K trabaja para todo modelo o todo videojuego, debe adaptarse a su franquicia. NBA es el mejor ejemplo de eso. NBA 2K es todo igual y que encaje con la franquicia. WWE 2K están haciendo exactamente lo mismo. Entonces se está perdiendo ese sentido de innovar y de brindarle algo cool, algo distinto a los jugadores, que es algo que realmente hace falta. You ended up with THQ and WWE, but my question for you is, you're also an actor. How's been life as an actor? Like, what works you've done? Like, tell me a little bit about this aspect of your life.
Sure. So I moved to Japan 5 years ago. My first job here was working at a theme park at Universal Studios Japan, where I worked in the Harry Potter section. And that was a 1-year contract. And when that was over, I came here to Tokyo because I've always loved Japan, you know, back even before I would come and visit Ukes. And I wanted to live here and try to be an actor here. And yeah, it's been a really great experience. I still love being here. I've been able to be a motion capture actor on some big video games, on a Marvel video game, and Hideo Kojima, who made the Metal Gear Solid franchise, he did a game called Death Stranding, and I played 2 characters on that. So I still do some video game stuff. But, you know, Japan, if you know, has some wacky, wild commercials. I've been able to be in some of them, do some stunts in some movies. So really a wide variety of things I've been able to do here.
Translate that. Justin Leeper también es actor y hace 5 años se mueve a Japón, a Tokio, al otro lado del mundo. Veo, no a Tokio, a Japón, y en aquel momento estaba trabajando en Universal Studios, específicamente en la sección de Harry Potter. Estuvo 1 año allí, ese fue el contrato que le dieron, y cuando se acaba ese contrato, él quería quedarse en Japón, se va ahí, sí que se mueve a Tokio y comienza a trabajar como actor en diferentes cosas. Ha tenido la oportunidad de ser un motion actor para videojuegos de Marvel, para otra serie de videojuegos bastante importante en toda esta industria. Y lo interesante es que ya ha trabajado también en toda esta sección de comerciales de Japón, que son un poquito wacky, como dice, un poquito loco, y brindar algo diferente a su portfolio también. How's been life in Japan? I mean, passing from living in Minnesota, which is a relatively calm place, relaxed, everyone knows each other, to Japan, which is like a sea of people. How's been that cultural difference?
Well, Japan, it's amazing because Tokyo is one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in the world. And that's where I live. But, you know, I always feel safe. There's always, you know, people are polite. They follow the rules. The train system is so convenient and, you know, clean and efficient. So it's just, it's a wonderful blend of technology and deep history. It's just great living here. I'm so happy to be here. It's, there's always something to do, places to go. And I have a wonderful woman by my side who can help translate for me if I have any issues. But my Japanese is okay.
It's improving. That's the important part. Every day it needs to improve. I'll translate that. ¿Cómo es la vida en Tokio para Justin Leeper? Bueno, pasa de vivir en Minnesota a vivir en Tokio. Tokio, él menciona que es una de las ciudades más grandes, si no la más grande del mundo en cuanto a cantidad de habitantes, en cuanto a movimiento 24/7. El sistema de trenes es sumamente limpio, el sistema público también. La gente sigue las reglas, son muy educados. Y como él menciona, tiene a su pareja, a su esposa, quien está a su lado todo el tiempo. Y si él necesita algo de traducción o está perdido en algo, ella le ayuda, pero su japonés continúa mejorando con el tiempo. Te pueden seguir a Justin Leeper en su cuenta de Twitter, como Justin Leeper _ yo, Justin Leeper _ o guión bajo yo. Ahí lo pueden buscar de esa manera. Y en YouTube, como Violent Lee, en donde está actualmente narrando las diferentes creaciones que él hizo en el mismo Road to WrestleMania de los videojuegos. Un producto muy interesante. What motivated you, first of all, to create a YouTube channel, and secondly, to do this kind of content that immediately, like when you talked to me before starting the interview, like it hit me just in the nostalgia in terms of, holy shit, I played this for a while. So what does, why do you do that?
Yeah, I've had as a performer, I've had a YouTube channel for a very long time, but nobody really cared about it. And I'm not super proud of it, but I think I got a lot of attention when I first started talking about what was going on with the 2K series. 2K20, as everybody knows, was a very problematic series. And I felt that 2K wasn't really sharing enough information with the public. So I had some sources, and I took it upon myself to kind of let people know what was going on. And, when they canceled 2K21, I was one of the first people to let everybody know about that. But yeah, Road to WrestleMania, I still get people who were, talking to me about that. I think it's because when they first played it, they were kids, and now they're a little bit older, and they maybe have become dissatisfied with other games that they're playing and go back and visit that, or just have great fond memories of it. And hey, I was a very big part of Road to WrestleMania, so why don't I play these again for myself? And that will be fun. And then I'll, shed a lot of new light on, why these decisions were made, or just cool backstage stories, or, working with Cesaro or Austin Aries. And, I think I had a lot to share that I thought people would be interested in. And yeah, there's some people who have really enjoyed those videos. So I'm very happy to have made them and be making more.
I'll translate that. El canal de YouTube de Justin Leeper lo pueden encontrar nuevamente como Violent Lee en YouTube, así corridito les va a aparecer. Y ahí él habla de diferentes cosas. Tiene muchas fuentes dentro de la industria de los videojuegos, una escena en donde todavía sigue activo. Y por ejemplo, cuando WWE, la serie 2K, que tuvo muchos problemas, él se encargó de orientar a las personas de cómo poder solucionarlas, de cómo iban el progreso, etcétera, etcétera, porque 2K no lo estaba haciendo. Y en adición a eso, para ese momento, cuando llega la cancelación del juego 2K21 o 2K21, él fue una de las primeras personas en informarlo al mundo entero a través de su canal de YouTube, nuevamente por su fuente. Así que si le encanta este mundo, échenle un ojo, porque ahí están muchas de las exclusivas dentro de la industria de la franquicia 2K. Pero volviendo al punto, la gente le pedía, mira, el Road to WrestleMania llamaba la atención. Esto fue algo que marcó las vidas de muchos de nosotros. Y ahí entonces Justin Leeper comenzó a brindarle a la gente un poco de la narración de lo que estaba haciendo, de cómo nacen todos estos conceptos, historias backstage con talentos como Austin Aries o como Cesaro cuando empezaron a trabajar como motion artists en aquel momento dado, y un contenido bastante peculiar que creo que a muchos de ustedes les va a gustar. Así que échenle un ojo, está disponible en YouTube como Violent Lee. Before we go to our last question, I wanted to thank you so much for your time and for being here with us today. Last but not least, what message can you send to all the fans out there, more than to follow the video game industry as a general, to continue trying different video games in terms of pro wrestling? Because most of them, their passion after the 2K20 the one, like it immediately dies. So what message can you send to them so you can fuel their fire again?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I want to say thank you, Michael, for reaching out to me. And it's been very fun talking to you. So I want people to realize maybe first that making video games is very difficult. When I got into it, I thought I knew what it was about, but it's so much harder, especially when you have the kind of time restraints that our series had. But there are many passionate gamers making wrestling video games right now. You have M. Dickey with his game that came out on Switch, Wrestling Empire. You have Retromania just coming out. So there are smaller, passionate teams that are still trying to make new wrestling games. And of course, the AEW game is in development by Ukes. So I'm very excited to see what they come up with. I get the frustration, for a long time, we've been eating the same meal every year, and it hasn't gotten any spicier, hasn't gotten any more flavorful. So we're kind of done with that. But 2K has had 2 years to work on the new game. And I think that if there's any year that they would come and want to really be motivated and make a great game, it will be in WWE 2K22, which, we'll see what happens, but I'm excited to see what they do. I'm excited what AEW does. The Wrestling Code is another wrestling video game that's coming out that has signed so many classic talents and so many indie talents. So, there's a lot of interesting stuff that just released or on the horizon. Fire Pro Wrestling is a great game that I suggest any wrestling fans try out. So there's a lot of wrestling games out there. You just have to look a little bit and have a little bit of patience and understanding. And I think that you'll find something that you like.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo ustedes pueden nuevamente avivar esa pasión de la lucha libre por los videojuegos? Sabemos que, como él dice, es un poquito frustrante después de lo que vimos, de ver lo mismo todos los años y encima lleno de box como en el 2020 con WWE 2K20. Pero hay un videojuego distinto para todos y hay variedad, no solamente WWE. Tienes ahora mismo el Fire Pro Wrestling, tienes a The Wrestling Co., que son dos videojuegos independientes que han filmado mucho talento, leyendas, específicamente Wrestling Co. Han filmado bastantes leyendas para darle un contenido distinto. Tienes también el videojuego de AEW que está entonces en creación, está llamando la atención de todo el mundo, al igual que el de teléfono móvil. Y si hay un año en que WWE y la franquicia 2K tienen que sacarla del parque, es este año para la franquicia, el videojuego de 2022, el WWE 2K22. Así que vamos a esperar lo mejor y continúen entonces buscando un poquito para darle un poquito de variedad a su gusto. Mr. Leeper, it's been an honor for us to have you as our guest. Thank you so much for your time and always wishing you success in your career and in your personal life.
It was my pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Perfect. Este fueron Justin Leeper y Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.